Representative O'Rourke, yet again, the legalization question came up tonight. You said that you were in support of a lot of different options or different discussions. There was some controversy following the release of one of Congressman Reyes's recent commercials. So I don't think that you've ever stated one way or another emphatically and with clarity what your position is on legalization. So, do you support legalization of drugs? If not, do you support legalization of marijuana?
I think given everything that we laid out in tonight's debate, the 10,000 people plus murdered in Juarez over the last 5 or 6 years, the fact that we imprison more people than any other country on the face of the planet, the fact that marijuana today is just as available in your kids' middle school and high school as it was in 1971 when the war on drugs was declared, only it's 200 to 300 times more potent. Given the fact that we have all those problems despite having spent $1 trillion on the war on drugs, it is my personal conclusion that it makes sense to look at ending the prohibition on marijuana, regulating it, tightly regulating it, and tightly controlling who it is sold to. I think with that, we could do a far better job of keeping marijuana away from kids, which is my first and foremost concern. We could do a far better job of keeping marijuana proceeds out of the hands of cartels, which use that money to recruit people into their organizations, corrupt public officials, and kill with complete impunity in Ciudad Juarez and throughout Mexico. So that is my personal belief. I have, however, been very careful in this campaign to not make that part of my platform. My 3 leading issues in my platform are jobs and the economy, doing a better job for our veterans and the VA, and providing some accountability in the congressional office for El Paso. So that is my personal position. Those are my beliefs, and that's the distinction that I make between what I believe personally and what I'm running on as a candidate for Congress.
So that leads me to this follow-up question. You kind of sprang to the national scene within the context of the discussion about legalization.
Right.
So why is it not part of your top 3? Why the conscious effort to avoid making it part of your platform if that's what sprang you to the national platform?
Because I think as the congressional representative for the 16th District, which is essentially most of El Paso County, you have to reflect for the most part, the consensus of your community, of those people that you are elected to represent. And I just don't know that that is where El Paso is right now. I think that if any legislation pertaining to, say, marijuana prohibition was in front of the Congress, that's an issue on which I'd come back to El Paso, talk to my constituents, get their input, and then make a decision that I thought was in the best interests of my community and my country. There are many examples of this throughout the history of the United States. Abraham Lincoln, when he's running for president in 1860, is totally opposed to slavery. But he does not run on a platform of abolition. He realizes that the United States and his constituency is not yet ready for that. I think it's important to make those distinctions in terms of what you're running on and what you personally believe and what your values are. Do I think that we need to rethink the war on drugs? Unequivocally, yes. Do I think we're doing our community and our sister city of Ciudad Juarez a huge disservice by continuing the status quo? Yes, unequivocally. And so I think it warrants discussion, and I'd like all of El Paso to be part of that discussion, and I'd like to represent El Paso's interests in front of the Congress.
I can't help but think in your analogy with Abraham Lincoln that while he didn't run on that, he did sign the Emancipation Proclamation once he was elected.
Right. Well, I've got to say that one of the gravest injustices, if you care about social justice, and I know you do, if I care about social justice, if El Paso has a proud record of social justice, there's no greater problem in the United States today than the war on drugs and the fact that we imprison more people than any other country on the face of the planet. And guess what? They are predominantly Latinos and African Americans. And it doesn't matter who's actually doing the drugs and who's actually using marijuana in this country. Latinos and African Americans are doing the time. And so if you want to consign yet another generation to prison, and then after prison to efforts to gain employment unsuccessfully because of their track record, who then end up back in prison and a life of crime, then let's continue with the status quo. If you'd like to see a change, if you'd like to see some social justice in this country, then this is an issue that we need to be talking about. And so those are my positions on this.
Two questions. They're unrelated to the discussion we're just having. We're in front of, the debate today was in front of an organization that advocates for the LGBT community. One of your opponents has been part of the recall effort. One of your opponents is extremely anti-gay. His words, not mine. Why have you not called him out on that?
Frankly, with all due respect to Mr. Mendoza, I don't know how serious his candidacy is, and I don't want to give his ridiculous assertions any more oxygen by acknowledging them. I will say, though, in the spirit of your question, that the person sitting to my right was Luis Torres, the policy director, the legislative director for Congressman Reyes, who in the previous debate said that we shouldn't be talking about equality. And who represents a congressman who voted to enshrine DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, in the National Defense Authorization Act on the Armed Services Committee. And I think that's something that he has to answer to and has failed to do so. Furthermore, while this community and council members such as myself and others were fighting to make sure that we had equality for the employees of the city of El Paso, and there was a lot of contention and a lot of debate, the congressman was absolutely silent. And that silence speaks volumes. So I don't know that the congressman has a record that he can be proud of in the LGBT community. By contrast, I have one that I'm very proud of, and I think that support was seen today in the room.
Final question. You had talked about how many doors you've knocked on, which is a pretty significant number. How much is it?
Over 11,000 personally. That's in addition to what volunteers have knocked on.
So now that they've had the redistricting take place, how many doors did you needlessly knock on because they're no longer in the district? And does the redistricting affect your campaign plan from there on out?
I believe the majority, if not every single one of the doors that we knocked on was in all of the maps, or it actually was in the current map. I did spend a lot of time in the Northeast and in parts of the West Side that were removed from one of those maps. Those are now restored. So I believe every door I've knocked on is in the map that we have today. How this current map affects my chances, I really can't say. That the strategy remains the same. Knock on as many doors, talk to as many people as I possibly can, share my message about jobs, turning around our VA, and providing some accountability and reform in the congressional office and in Congress. And that message seems to resonate. So I'm going to continue doing the same thing I've been doing for the last 6 months.